Hello, I'm sure everybody can hear me. Not that we need a microphone, but since where we're recording, is it too loud for everybody in the back? Good. Please do scan your badges as we are trying to find out who is all attending. I am Justin Ross. I'm with Fluke Biomedical. I'm one of our product experts, and I'm joined here by a group of biomeds. And after they told me which button to push, I broke it already. There we go. Now I get the clicker. Okay. We have Ben Roberts, Mike Zimmer, Boyd, and Elliot. I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone off and let everybody do the introduction. The largest challenge we're going to have today is we have a few questions, and in practice, we weren't able to keep ourselves under an hour. So we're going to see if we can do our best to get this under an hour today.
So I'm going to kick it off and give a brief introduction. I'm Ben Roberts. I'm the biomedical faculty at North Seattle College. I come with over 25 years experience in the electronics and biomedical industry from technician, manager, and system administrator.
I'm Boyd Campbell. I'm one of the owners of Southeastern Biomedical. I've been in the biomed field for 37 years now. Done everything, as I like to say, from anesthesia to x-ray in my career.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Zimmer from FSI. I'm the Solutions Engineering Manager there. I've been working within the CMMS and healthcare CMMS realm for the better part of a decade. Good to be with you all.
Hi, my name is Elliot Weldon. I work at Fluke Biomedical. Been here for the past 3 years. Before working at Fluke, I was a biomed for a few years, and then I worked field service for 6-7 years, traveling around the U.S., working in hospitals.
Alrighty, so looking around the room, it seems to be we have an audience of some pretty seasoned biomeds and technicians. So we're going to start off with a question for everybody here. Is an AED a life support device? And I ask you, if you're comfortable enough, please raise your hand if you think that an AED is a life support device. Okay, we got a few. Alrighty, so we're going to build on this. You ready? Here's question 2. It's even harder. With a bated breath. Is a defibrillator a life support device? See a few more hands. So this is an interesting topic, and this is one of the ones that we actually started this entire debate on. Is a defibrillator a life support device? Because we started talking about how do people PM equipment decide what needs to be PM'd and how it needs to be PM'd. And we started talking about what are life support devices. And the first one we came up with, well, how about defibrillators? Because believe it or not, some people consider that the patient's already dead and you're just trying to bring them back to life. So it's not a life support device. Yeah, I'm old, man. I PM everything, even the wheels on the bottom of the chairs. I can't help myself. And then I have other people saying, well, come on, maybe it is a life support device. So with that, here is the next question. How many of you are following the OEM procedure when managing your PMs? And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ben, because we're going to open up some interesting discussion here.
Actually, I believe it's Boyd that we're going to have.
I've got you here on this. All right. Got one more question before we start. How many of Good. Now we can talk, okay, guys? You know, I see a lot of when it's answering the questions, given what I call the Presbyterian amen. I grew up in a Presbyterian church. I can say it. You ask a question, you see them go, you can raise your hands. It's okay in here and we can talk. So, all right. So the reason we brought this up and we started this off with the topics, of talking about defibrillators, AEDs, what are we doing to service these things? One of the things that you, Justin, brought up here, there was actually discussion of whether a defibrillator, it's been going on out there, is a life-saving device. I'm old school. Yes, it is. It's a life-saving device, in my opinion here. Even though we're not, I got into a discussion one time in a class I was teaching that what does a defib do? It starts the heart. No, it don't. It stops it. It's to stop the heart, let the SA node pick up. We're turning the computer on, turn it off, turning it back on here. So, all right, with that being said, how many of you guys really are, and I would like to see a good show of hands, many of, like, if you're doing life, I'm going to say defib is a life support device, How many of you are following the OEM procedures when you're doing it? Really, I'd like to see a show of hands.
I'm on.
Okay. You don't do anything anyhow, Justin. Okay. How many of you are using an AEM to do them? How many just don't care what you're doing? Okay. Into the discussion here a little bit of a lot of people say, yeah, I'm doing the OEM procedure here. And when it gets down to it, we start looking at it. How many of you really are? Is that the one you have to use? Is that the one you're using? A little bit. Just like that. Okay. I don't like these things. Okay. So, all right. So what to use for like your test equipment devices? Boy, this is a quiet room this morning. Nobody is awake, are they? Justin, help me out here, man. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Does Joint Commission or anybody say that we have to do the manufacturer's PM on these things? Who can tell me what's the two things that Joint Commission says we have to go by the manufacturer's recommendations? I will tell you. It says in their Joint Commission standards, it says radiology and it says lasers in there. It does not say thou shalt do it for anything else in there. Now, here's the question that comes up from that, or a problem we run into. When we get into like the radiology devices here, has anybody ever had an issue trying to get a manual on an x-ray room or from one of these radiology manufacturers that has a full PM procedure in it? This is something we have fought for many, many, many years. 21 CFR, we quote it, we try to live by it. We tell them, you have to give us this. What do? They just look at you and go, no. Why? Because nobody enforces this, first off. We can say it's all required, that's great, it's good. We put it in our pre-purchase evaluations of things. We ask for it, of which, by the way, I strongly encourage you to do. At least you've got something on paper there to try to agree with. But a lot of these places are not doing getting from everybody everything that we need. All right, so let's kind of go on here. Flip over to the next one here. See if I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. I'm jumping ahead. Okay, I can remember what the next slide was here exactly. Okay, I'm at 5 minutes here. All right, I will give it up here and I'll let Elliot talk here a little bit as well too. All right, so standards. There are multiple standards listed by manufacturers out there. Some of them say that when we do an electrical safety, well, we've got to work off of IEC 60601-1 or whatever it is. All of us in here are probably going, I don't even know what that is. I'm working off of NFPA 99. Well, the manual says this, so what are we really doing? Point being on this, first off, be careful when you're saying to a Joint Commission inspector or somebody like that, yeah, we're doing all manufacturer perform PM here. Are we really? All right, so the next question is, what are you basing if you're doing AEM? What are you basing that off of? You're typically basing that off of a history of the device. You're basing it off of, okay, is there a preventable, would a PM prevent a corrective that needs to be done? So you've got repairs, things happen. All right, for that repair, are you tracking what could have been prevented by performing a PM on that device? Many times that answer is no. We all know that things happen, things break. By you going and doing a PM, doing your electrical safety, doing your output test, whatever it is, are we actually adding the value, or are we actually just going through some motions? And we see different strategies here. It doesn't matter what we are. Some hospitals we go into say we're going to do monitors once a year. Some of them we go into say we don't do them at all. We do a sampling. Some of them go, hey, if it breaks, we'll take a look at it. And if we get so many within a certain amount of time, then we will actually go back and try to take some action on that. I thought,
Yeah, Boyd kind of covered everything. So, no, kidding. Yeah, and I work with a lot of customers that do build procedures using, you know, a specific workflow. And one of the things that kind of comes up a lot is what electrical safety standard are you following? And you have different ones for maybe like initial inspection. So does everybody follow like a different standard maybe for their initial inspections, or do they usually stick to maybe NFP 99, a certain year value? Yeah, so it's just about making sure that your documentation lines up with what the hospital organization wants you to do for testing. The other thing too that we've noticed when we work with biomeds, and I probably did the same thing, is the work that's being completed, you document it the same way, right? So some organizations have a very less stringent rules on what needs to be documented. For electrical safety, did ground resistance pass or fail, or was it 300 milliohms, right? So just understanding what needs to be documented based on, you know, the standards that are set by the organization. And I know like a few specific customers where I've worked with where you ask them, so I want to help you build this standardized workflow. How are you currently doing it? Well, we use the OEM procedure. Well, maybe there's not even a checklist in that procedure, right? So then you're kind of up to interpretation of what you can find from the manual. What part of the manual are you looking through? Of the 150 pages, which parts are you pulling out to make part of the standard? So a lot of like leeway and trying to understand, and where you kind of like out there in the, I guess, the abyss, trying to figure out what tests should I be doing and how should I be doing them. Yeah, there's definitely different, even in local municipalities, you have to check and see how the standards change. In one county, there might be different standards. And then in another county, I forget who the governing body that would change that. I don't know if you guys know, but different rules can apply to just different geographic areas. So just making sure that, you know, and with that, that doesn't mean you have to change the test. You might need to add a few extra things, but a lot of it is just the values, right? So maybe for electrical safety, it's not 500 milliohms, it's 300 milliohms, or, you know, 325. So just being able to understand what in a big organization that spreads across maybe a whole state or region, the test could change.
Okay, cool. You know, the answer to this question probably for most of you is, well, yeah, of course, it's, you know, what a CMMS kind of exists for. And of course, we need to satisfy regulatory requirement components and all those reporting needs that, you know, that our customers need day in and day out. But you know, Ben, you and I are going to ping pong here. I think it's really a question of like what kinds of questions are you wanting to answer with your CMMS data? Because you know, if we're just, you know, capturing data from kind of a pass fail point of view, and that's what we need from a, you know, checking the box from a regulatory perspective, and then that's fine. But there's so much more that you can be getting out of the data, but it requires some additional input, let's say. So Ben, what thoughts do you have about that?
As a hiring manager, system administrator, one of the things that I saw, it was getting reports for the technicians, like what PMs are due, and reports for the customers, like how are we doing, especially with the requirement for 100% on-time completion. So how many are getting reports for customers, and how many are getting reports for the technicians? So who's reports for CMS right now? For customers or couple? Okay. How many people are pulling reports for their senior administrations or their C-suite to help leverage for hiring? Who wants to get more technicians and justify that for their C-suite to say, hey, we need more technicians? Yeah. So that's something I literally did is when I took over as supervisor and became the hiring manager, I looked at the 4-year trend and said, this is our history. This is where we're going. And I went from $600,000 in the hole to $200,000 in the black for technicians in that process by looking at our PM schedule, our trending, and with the focus not on money, but the focus on schools and tools. The money was a consequence. I was able to look at our repair history and our PM history and wasn't saying I needed it for the money, I needed it for the schools and tools by looking at the CMS.
Follow-up question, if you keep the mic. Okay. So, you know, you get in seat and you're looking to make those sorts of decisions or forecast your resource needs or your schooling and tooling needs. What needed to change about the data that was already in the tool? Like, was there any sort of like cultural change around what that data integrity or data capturing requirements were needing to be day in and day out for you to get to that level of being able to interrogate the data in the way that you did?
Great question, thank you. So it was two things. One, we need someone look at the data, and two, we needed to have the data needed to be like you were saying, the data integrity. We needed to not have text fields. So we couldn't just be saying this is broken, this is why. We needed to have clean data with separate data fields, like our repair codes, our failure codes. We needed to be able to say, here's our categories of what we're in. We couldn't just failure, could not find, broke. You know, we needed to have clean categories. Now, the good news is with our large language models in AI, it's getting better, but not a lot of the CMSs are implementing that quote yet. It's getting better. However, we need to be putting clear, understandable failure codes, return to service codes, so that the technicians can understand that. So that's one of the things that I had to implement in there is what is could not locate, return to service, and all the failure codes and the return to service codes and whatever your CMMS is putting in there. Can the technicians understand this? And one of the great ways to do that is include the technicians in the conversation. Well, what does this mean to you? Having clear data that the technicians can clearly understand and not having too many of them.
So in particular, what was something that you were taking to administration to try to help get more FTEs for your facility?
So great question, Boyd. So I said, this is the trend, and this is literally a trend in data saying, this is how we're growing. And if we're going to keep up with this, work hours. And said, this is, I took money, I talked money to the senior management. So people above me, I talked money. People below me, I talked about what they were interested in, which was schools and tools. How can I support you to do the job for the technicians below me? For the people above me, what did they want to hear? They wanted to hear how I can get the job done and how I can afford it. So people above me, I talked money. People, the technicians and the support staff, they didn't want to hear my problems and how we were under budget. They wanted to hear how I can support them to do the job. People above me, they wanted to hear how I was going to pay for it. But how I can pay for it was finances. How I can pay for it, get the people that were doing the job out there doing the job. Yes.
That sounds like a lot of time and effort.
Yes.
Is there anything that you can do? All this time and effort.
Yes.
In building this.
Yes.
And we're now we're going to do more testing. Takes more time.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm gonna take that in just a moment because a beautiful segue. So, you know, Ben was sharing like data, you know, adhering to a data integrity policy, kind of constructing one, making sure that it's disseminated across the organization so everyone's singing from the same sheet of music, right? But ultimately, you're going to have to create some sort of visualization or complex analysis of all this data that we're gathering over the course of the use of a tool like a CMMS. That's not in everybody's wheelhouse, right? I I love reporting as much as the next fella, but I am not going to do a complicated like two-tailed p-test and statistical significant financial reporting and deliver that to a CFO to help conversations around hiring and or capital equipment replacement decisions. What we have started to see across our customer organizations is that they will pull in IT resources. And I know that there's another session, like, how do we improve communications between IT and clinical engineering during MD Expo? So what I would recommend, if you guys have these resources available to you within your organizations, is pull in like a business analytics representative from the IT organization or wherever they might happen to reside within your specific org chart, and have them take all of the knowledge you have about the devices you're maintaining and the teams that are out there getting the work done, and help them model that in a way that communicates exactly what your organizations are delivering from a value perspective and how much more the org can realize from additional investments into FTE. Because oftentimes it's just a communication issue that we're needing to translate what we all know day in and day out to the folks that ultimately control the purse strings or the wallet. Now, to go back to your amazing question, right? So we designed this, we established this need to capture really robust data out there in the field. If I'm a technician and I heard that, I'm going to go, well, that means I'm going to have to like interact with the CMMS tool, and we're going to have all these broken out procedure readings. And Mike, that sounds like it's going to suck. And I don't want to interact with our CMMS. I want to do the job that I was hired to do and make sure that this equipment is functioning appropriately and always available. So where does automation come into play? And I get to hand the mic over now. So I'm going to hand it over to Elliot, because when it comes to testing automation, there's nobody else on here that knows more about it than you do.
Yeah, when I was a biomed too, we used paper and pencil, and I'll be honest, my biggest challenge was my handwriting. You do a test, right? And then you go back to your CMMS or your computer to put the notes in. I had a desktop, so a lot of people probably have laptops. Maybe they can do the work while they're on site. But just being able to like read exactly what I was writing in the notes, and then through that, not using like a digital tool or an automation platform, sometimes PMs would change, right? Everybody's probably familiar with the Zoll R series. I'm just use it. No, I'm not saying anything bad about Zoll, right? But just they change their PMs once in a while, right? So sometimes when that happens in the shop, maybe half the shop gets the update, or part of the shop gets the update and says, I've been doing it the same way for 15 years, or whatever the case may be. They don't want to make changes. Being able to have a tool like digitally where you have control, maybe the management or the senior technicians have control of the PM to make sure that you are following the standards that are being placed by if you're following by the OEM standards or the hospital's AEM procedure, being able to use that digital automation tool. And in with that, not only do you save, with my issue, the handwriting, trying to figure out what did I write down, being able to save time with pulling the data in directly from the device itself. We don't like to talk about pencil whipping, but with pulling the data in directly from the device, that's not maybe something that's ever thought about or could be done, because you can't really change what's being pulled in from the device itself. And then with a lot of the automation tools out there, there's an ability to make like standardized documentation. So not only do you save time on the automation piece itself, but then the documentation that is delivered into the CMMS can be standardized to make sure that everything that you did is now documented. Earlier I'd mentioned that sometimes I've worked with customers that don't mean to do it on purpose, and I did it too. Didn't get all of the work documented in the CMMS so that they could go back and CMMS companies like FSI who can mine data and figure out maybe when a problem might happen with the device, or being able to sort the work that's being done. So I think I can hand this off to Mike now. So with the automation type platform that can do the documentation and pull the data in directly from the hardware, you have the ability to take that documentation and move it directly into your CMMS, or I don't know, ERP or field service software. I think about when I did electrical safety testing, and still do, right, when I'm working with customers. Sometimes you can do an electrical safety test in, let's just say, 7 minutes, right? A basic electrical safety test. But then if you're putting it into a CMMS, that part alone too might take 5-6 minutes. Finding the work order, putting in, leakage current, ground resistance, maybe applied parts. And then if you're putting in the actual values, making sure that they've passed and then documenting it. Automation tools can pull that data in automatically, right? So the electrical safety test might take 7 minutes and the documentation might take 5. Well, with automation, you might lower the time that it takes to do the testing itself, but then when you do the documentation, you save a lot of time also, right? Being able to just drop it right into the work order and move on to the next one. So it's kind of how the relationship is between the CMMS and the automation platform. And from what we've seen, customers tend to, benefit a lot from the time savings and standardization of the testing that's being completed.
One question here, Jim. We're talking about input and data. And this is for anybody up here. Okay, you've got the tech who types like a technician. You've got the guy who goes, I don't know how to do stuff. I want to stay with my pencil and paper. We're moving to this. I don't know if it's an HR issue or what. How do you deal with getting that person into this realm now and go, it's here, you've got to do this, and actually get the buy-in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge that we see it with moving into a tool like automation is not that people don't like it. It's that there's a lot of upfront work, and if you're just prepared to know that this will take time as we start and improve upon what we're currently doing, so that we can move forward and maybe be better with our documentation and, in my case, my handwriting. I think that once you kind of get that buy-in from everybody in the shop, and then knowing that it's going to take some time, that once you start in the process, it gets a lot easier as you go forward.
If my services was listening, yeah. So not to give you a number, but it always depends, right? In terms.
All right. And one thing, and to lead into this next question, training. You gotta advocate for the training. And yes, it might add to the budget, but you're gonna save yourself a lot of money and headache in the long run if you budget for the training, because if you don't budget for the training up front, you're gonna pay for it in the long run. Now, one of the things that's gonna help is, go ahead and go to the next question, is how many of you experience an aging biomed in your organization? I just see the smiles right now. So, I mean, and I see that, but just the smiles. I mean, I don't need, just smile if you're, experiencing this. Okay, thank you. So right now, I think 24/7 just did their survey for salary. 17%, almost 20%, almost 1/5 is over the age of 60. So almost 1 out of 5 is over the age of 60. That's an impressive statistic. And so, is this even on? I can't even hear myself. Can you all hear me? Okay, so I'm just going to hold this. But yeah, so right now, in working with the new students, I can, in the past 2 years, I've had 100% of them have a job either before or during their internship. And the placement is they're still asking for more. Okay, so with that, and unfortunately, what's happening is the biomedical training schools, and I'm not talking the Department of Defense that's doing a really good job about training biomeds in the service in the military that are coming out from the military, but the schools are closing because there's not enough coming into the schools. Because I'll just be honest, and I'll call us out, and myself included in this, is we're doing not a good job about advertising for ourselves, you know. And so one of the things that, you know, we're doing is the old biomed would walk in, do a repair, and walk out. Now, we used to call these ghosts. You know what I'm talking about? The ones that would walk in and not even advertise, hey, how is this? You know, is this working for you? We weren't talking to the MAs. We weren't talking to the nurses. We weren't talking to the doctors. We weren't advertising like, how is this working for you? You know, and the old biomed was just sitting there saying, I'm fixing the equipment. Instead of changing the mentality of like, I'm finding the problem. I'm finding the solution to the problem. Because how many times have you found that the problem wasn't the equipment, but the training on the equipment? The nurses, the MAs, the doctors didn't understand how to use the equipment. It was a networking problem. It was a problem outside of the actual equipment. It was a settings issue. I'm seeing a lot of smiling, a lot of head nodding. So it's a project management issue because someone didn't set it up correctly, not biomed, but it's the biomeds that are solving the problem. How many like tooting your own horn? It's not in our nature. But that's the thing, is we need to get out there and find this and get out there and advertise ourselves and our services, not just within the doctors and nurses and departments, but to the C-suites, and to be able to not use just our data from our CMMSs to advertise, hey, we need more people, but to be able to get out there and have that ability to say, hey, we're able to serve this, and be able to have those communications, not just with IT, like how to set up these networks, but to be able to have those conversations with the departments and the C-suites and say, how do we get on there and have the conversations with the buyers? So who, you can either smile or raise your hands, who has a seat at the table when equipment's being purchased? Versus how many people get the phone call that we got a pallet full of stuff and like had no idea it was showing up until it's already on a loading dock. Or yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. When you say both, that's a really good question. When you say both, it's on the loading dock and doesn't fit, or, you know, has the seat at the table and it still doesn't work. Love it. Oh yeah, absolutely. You had that one rogue ordering. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's what Biomed. I mean, we solve problems. Absolutely. You know, that's one of the things I train my students in, is our job is to solve problems, not to fix equipment anymore, but to solve the problems, because we have to be able to communicate. You know, that's the new world we live in. We just don't fix equipment that's broke. We have to solve the problems. We have to look at the total picture. Yeah, I'm seeing the head nodding. Not as many smiles, but I see the heads nodding. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's it, is with this aging biomed, is we got to be able to get out there and see the bigger picture and have that, get out there and have those conversations. And because what's happening is the people don't, that time and time again, I hear people go, I didn't even think about that. I mean, how many times do you hear people come up to you and go, oh, I didn't even think that someone works on this? Yeah, Absolutely. Thank you. Totally agree. Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Yes. Yes. Oh, I'll ask you to clarify that question. I do, or what am I encouraging you to do? Yes. So, yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So specifically for me, you're asking for me? Love the question. Thank you so much for asking it. So um, day one, so I'm in the electronics program. Day one, and I don't care. So in the program, we got aviation, mechatronics, and biomed. Day one, I introduce myself and I put a list of like, what's your name, what got you interested. Day one, I don't call on everyone. I go, you, but I invite the entire class to introduce themselves. Say, why are you interested in electronics? And what are you afraid of? What are you concerned about? What are you excited about? What makes a good instructor or a good supervisor? Do that every one of my classes. In my biomed classes, I crank it up a notch. And quite literally, I had a hospital tour, and for the internships, the director of University of Washington, which oversees 3 hospitals, pulled in 3 of my students, quite literally right there on the spot, did the interview for the internship. And they were just like, pulled them in, and they came out and said, thank you, because they literally asked me this questions that they did this. So from day one, before, I don't care if they're going into mechatronics or biomed, they do this. Also, and if any of you ever find a better way to do a biomed training, please, please, please tell me, other than death by PowerPoint. I'm looking for a better way to, I have them read the PowerPoints for 2 reasons. One, they get their medical terminology. Again, they have to take medical terminology, but they literally have to read out loud in front of everyone. I don't care if they're an international student, as English is a second language. I don't care if they have to sit. No, I'm really actually uncomfortable standing because I'm used to like, okay, y'all, we got this. Actually, this feels a lot more comfortable. So this is actually a pain for me, but I have them talk in front of the entire class. Although it's their classmates that they've been working with for 2 years, they literally have to get out of their shell. They have to stumble over the medical words. So I get them talking in front of it. Yes, they have a script, but they have to get out of that. And you're absolutely right. About 75, if not 90% of them are introverts, but they all have to take a turn. I don't tell them when, but each class period, they have to get out. And I get them out there and doing that. And third, I said I was only going to give them 2. I make them go find their own internship. I say, you have to go cold call 3 places and introduce yourself, and do not talk to HR. You have to talk to the shop. You have to talk to a lead, a supervisor, or a manager. Give me their name, their phone number, and email address. It could be the shop phone number. And do you know how hard it is to find the clinical engineering phone number? I'm a jerk. Exactly. You got to go find the clinical engineering. I don't want the HR, and I don't want the main number. And I'm part of the Washington State Biomed Association. I know 90% of them. And if I don't know them, I'm calling them myself and introducing myself. So for those 3 things, I make them get out of their shell, and they hate it, every one of them. But afterwards, They're like, oh, this is so useful because I compile the list that each of them make and add it to the list. So when they go out and find their job, because they might not be hired right off the internship, they go find it. Actually, that hasn't been true for the past 2 years. But when they go find it later on, they have that complete list for finding some other position. Did you have a question? Okay, just stretching. Totally used to that. That's me, the teacher, and me. I'm looking for this just to go, hey, you got a question? So, yeah.
Just to lead with the last question we want to touch on. What suggestions do you have to encourage people to enter the biomed field?
One of the things, at least a little bit of time.
4 minutes.
We are the ones who have to do this. We have either got to get out to the high schools, we got to get out to something, but in general, you know, biomed now, we're not the sexy career, it's IT out there. But how many times does somebody come up to you and they go, hey, what do you do? I fix the stuff in the hospital. That's the answer. I did it to the Uber driver on the way over here this morning. You know, I could have give him a good example of, you know, safety and what we're here and how we do this. Guys, we don't sell ourselves anymore to try to get people interested in the programs. And there's lots of different programs out there now because the biomed schools are backing down. So now we have like the AMI apprenticeship programs out there. We have our state associations, which, okay, Ben, if your students ever show up to one of these state associations in wife beaters, shorts, and tennis shoes, please beat them severely. We see a lot of like, and it kills me, a lot of these students will come and they're dressed honestly like that. We've got to show this is a profession. This is a needed career. This is a good paying career for a 2-year degree. And there is so much out there that you can do, but we got to sell it. And somehow we got to get back down to the level to get people into the colleges, to keep those programs alive, to keep pushing people out.
Absolutely.
When we went to med school, we went to the mall when there were really malls where we were. We set up. Yeah, you know, hang on. So we had this oscilloscope and we were, got to get out.
I'm one of them old guys. I got my first, no offense, but kind of
So quick question for you. So for those that do internships, how many of them are paid or unpaid? Don't answer. Just think about that. So that's one of the things that I'm doing with my, I've went out and found a grant because I know in Seattle, Washington, there's only one paid internship. So I got a grant to cover the students' time because the school requires 220 hours for their internship because CMS is requiring the time for that because they're asking me, how are you qualified? So to get through the degree to work as a Tech 1, we want to make sure they have that time. So when they get that, go out there as a Tech 1 that says, here, my degree, I've time and experience out there, say I'm experienced. But all the internships are unpaid. That's half time for an entire term. Most people can't afford that nowadays. So I've gotten a grant, so my interns are getting paid for their time. So that's one of the things to look at from your side is to say, how can we get people when we're literally asking them to do half-time work or full-time work unpaid?